as our stewardship chairperson, I just would like to remind everyone that this month it is really, really super important that everybody goes to the website and looks for this gathered here banner that's on the front page and click on that. And there are 2 forms that we're asking you to fill in there after you've read all the material. One is your pledge form with the financial information, and the other one is your volunteer form. And it's just so important that we hear from everybody, no matter how big or how small your contribution may be. We just need to hear from you if that's possible, please. And then we'll ask Ilara to play the beautiful song that our musicians have prepared for us.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour,
gathered here in one strong body,
gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, gathered here in the struggle and the power, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power,
gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near, Spirit, draw near. Spirit, draw near.
Spirit, draw near.
As we begin this morning, I would like to acknowledge that I've made my home all of my life on the traditional lands of a diverse range of First Nations and Métis people. I was born and raised on a farm just north of the Neutral Hills, a meeting place for Indigenous peoples. The land where I now live is called Amiskwachee-Waskahigan, meaning Beaver Hills House, by the Cree peoples. The Dene also refer to it as Beaver Hills House, while other nations call it Big House. Since time out of memory, Amiskwachee-Waskahigan has been a meeting place for the Indigenous peoples. These lands have been enriched by their histories, languages, and cultures. As a non-Indigenous person, a settler, I have benefited from their presence, their generosity, hospitality, and knowledge. I commit myself to actions that honor and respect the spirit of the treaty that was signed in this territory so many decades ago. You may wish to add the name of your territory in our chat. Welcome to Westwood Unitarian Congregation. My name is Jacqueline Willette, and I use she, her pronouns. Westwood's Board of Trustees is bringing you this morning's service. They are Brenda Jackson, Maggie Davidson, Susan Anderson, Lorian Kennedy, and Dean Wood. Heather McLean Smith is also contributing some of the elements for our service. Our musician this morning is Westwood's own accomplished Sheila Killoran, with Rebecca Patterson providing our offertory music. Many others have contributed to the organization of this service, including our worship committee, the Westwood Board, of course, and our tech support for today, Ilara, Stefaniuk-Gaudet, and Bill Lee. As Unitarian Universalists, Westwoodians search for truth and meaning everywhere. But some of our named sources include the teachings of earth-based religions, the words and deeds of Kaphotic people, our own direct experience, guided by our reason and the results of science, and wisdom from the world's religions. Today, Lisa Stein will speak about how her Jewish heritage and upbringing walks hand in hand with her present-day UU beliefs. On behalf of the congregation, I bid a special welcome to those of you who are here for the first time or consider yourselves to be newcomers. The Sunday service is central to the life of this community. Worship reminds us of who we are, what we can become, how we want to live, and what we hope to give to the community and the world. While the form of our gatherings remains relatively stable, you will notice if you visit next week that the content and viewpoint will be different from today, as today is different from last week. Stay for conversation after the service and ask any question you want. We may or may not be able to answer, but we'll try. Also, join us at any event you see on our website. If you sign up there, you'll receive notifications by email. We hope to see you again. And now I invite Westwood Board Vice President Maggie Davidson to rekindle our UU flame.
All right, if you have a candle or chalice at home, you can bring it forward now. Our chalice lighting is by Nancy Reed McKee. Our community knows no boundaries. Our community knows no boundaries. We are not confined by the physical limits of walls, or for that matter, what often binds us, restricts us, holds us back. We are freer than we know. When we release ourselves and each other from expectations of what is needed for true community. We are here together in space. I see you, I hear you, I love you, and I light this chalice as a beacon of this community, holding us all together here now.
Good morning. My name is Heather, and I use the pronouns she and her. I have been fortunate to be raised as a Unitarian Universalist. My parents were wed inside their farmhouse by a UU minister in Edmonton. My family didn't attend church while we were on the farm, but when my parents divorced and I moved to Edmonton with my mother, she wasted no time in looking up a local Unitarian Universalist chapter. That might be exactly how I ended up at Westwood. In the fall of 1999, when my family first attended, Westwood Unitarian was a completely lay-led, except for the occasional short-term, 6-month-long intern minister. Basically, everything that Reverend Ann Barker does now was completely 100% up to us, Westwood. My family quickly became an integral part of the community. I quickly joined the youth group and the choir Harmonia. My mom enjoyed some of the programming, and before our family knew it, Westwood was all over our family calendar. My mom and I ended up moving away in 2004, but I ended up returning in 2012. Because of Westwood, I've gotten to know friends who have become like family. This community first welcomed my family into the city with open arms, helped shape my adolescence, guided me through young adulthood, and later comforted me when I lost my beloved mother. In nearly every sense of the way, I have grown up here. When COVID hit, we were suddenly reminded of the strength and resiliency of our beloved community. We light our stewardship candle in great appreciation for all who have helped us and continue to help us, those who keep Westwood's dream of compassionate community alive. We express our gratitude to those who have gathered here. Thank you. I would like to invite us to sing along with our mics muted at home to our next hymn, The Morning Hangs a Signal, played by Westwood's very own Sheila Killoran.
Sleepy faith above all fear. Night shall release its splendor, that morning shall appear.
Thank you, Sheila. And now we turn to a treasured traditional ritual time in our service, candles of joy and concern. Our candles help us to celebrate together the joy, appreciation, or milestone you are celebrating today. The light of our candles also provides a way for us to honor and acknowledge our grief, our painful sorrows, and challenging concerns. So at this time, we invite you to write your joy or concern in the chat and or to remain quiet as you reflect on the sacred experience of having joy and of having concern. Gratitude for that beautiful playing, Sheila, and also for all the wondrous expressions of joy, of celebration, and of loss and concern. And now I will light one more candle for all the joys and concerns that remain unspoken and yet held closely in our hearts. May all these joys and concerns be held in the warmth of our community. Now, please join me in our affirmation. May the light of these candles inspire us to use our power, to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to serve the spirit of truth in loving affection and trusting hope.
Westwood is self-supporting, and the self is you. We've just had a fun and a successful fundraising auction, but we're now looking for your support to help us thrive throughout the year ahead. Donating money is an exchange based on values. Think about what's really important in your life and consider that when donating, Westwood offers many opportunities to live out your values. You may donate by e-transfer or check. And I hope now you'll join us, remaining muted, and join us in singing our gratitude with Rebecca.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From together I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
Today's speaker, Lisa Stein, has been a member of Westwood for a number of years now. She was our service leader last week, and today she's our speaker. She'll be retelling bits of the story of how she's come from a Jewish upbringing to Unitarian Universalist, and how the values and principles of the two intersect. Over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to speak with Westwood again. The last time I spoke on a Sunday was for Earth Day last year, so I feel like it's a fun annual event now to come back and share my thoughts. So as you all know, March is our month of stewardship for Westwood Unitarian Congregation. And so that means that at every Sunday service this month, a member or a friend of the congregation will provide a testimonial that speaks to the importance of Westwood in their lives. So this is partially my testimonial and also my story of how my path has integrated traditions from two other religious practices, Judaism and earth-centered worship. Also, as the theme for this month is cooperation, I'll be sharing a brief history of my personal search for truth and meaning as a cooperative pursuit. So I've connected with like-minded people, and I ended up committing to Westwood as one of my preferred religious communities along the way. For me, it's not only the cooperation that I have within the Westwood community, but also my connection with the spirit of the Unitarian Universalist principles. And these principles span all UU congregations and beyond, because they're principles, as you'll see, that are shared by other religious traditions as well. So my tale is about integrating paths, my three spiritual paths, and how each segment in my search has seamlessly woven into the next and has formed an integrated religious practice for myself. So growing up in small town Colorado, if you looked at the entry in the phone book when my family lived there under Jewish community in the yellow pages, the phone number was my home phone number. Now, we weren't the only Jewish family in town, but there were so few of us in that region. And so we became the place where people would look us up, give us a call, and we would be the host family for students and scholars who would come to town for a brief stay. And they would call on us to spend a Shabbat supper or a Passover dinner to experience that cozy feeling that we get when we share religious values. The other part of my Jewish upbringing is that on Sunday mornings, my family would drive to the ski village, which was about a half an hour away from our hometown, for a bagels and lox breakfast. And the adults would talk about a topic on the Torah or the cycle of holidays that was going on at the time. And while they were doing that, my sister and I would attend Sunday school where the other Jewish kids from that ski town, and I should note that in the ski town, there were about 5 Jewish families. And so it was a larger community, even though it was a smaller location. And in this town, they had found a young teacher who was from Israel. And she had been involved in training children for Hebrew language classes and also teaching children about Jewish religious traditions to prepare them for the coming of age ceremony, which is the bar or bat mitzvah. So she was a wonderful Sunday school teacher. I know it's funny to think about Jews doing Sunday school because traditionally the Jewish holiday is Friday evening and then we attend synagogue Saturday mornings. But because of the smallness of our community, it was agreed on that we would adopt the Christian tradition of meeting on Sundays instead, but we talked about Judaism. So I absolutely loved these Sunday outings, but I have to admit that a large part of it is because I have a great fondness for bagels and cream cheese. But I did realize later that my fondness was also that warm, fuzzy feeling for the community. And I did have a high affinity for the Jewish religion and the values of that tradition. And I also didn't want our family to be the only ones with the Jewish faith. It just felt too isolating. And I really wanted to belong to a community, to learn about Judaism and to share with elders and other kids, and also to celebrate traditions with other families. So later on, I did end up learning enough Hebrew to proficiently chant the Torah and Haftorah pieces for the day of my bat mitzvah. But at that time, I was fortunate because we were living in Massachusetts. My dad had taken a 2-year leave from his college teaching job in Colorado to teach at Amherst College, which is a private school in Amherst, and we all went with him. And Amherst is also the town where the University of Massachusetts is. And so it's a large academic hotspot. And because of that, there were Jewish people everywhere. It almost felt like a Jewish village because that's just the location in the United States. Now, what was interesting is that the congregation where I performed my bat mitzvah, it was a really large service and a large congregation, but it was also a conservative Jewish synagogue. I was used to like a reformed of Reform Judaism because we formed our own Jewish traditions in our small village in Colorado. This was a large congregation that was conservative. And so I learned a completely different type of Judaism. And it was really, it was a fun and interesting experience to have my bat mitzvah there because it's a much more important ceremony in the conservative faith. So my bat mitzvah was attended by every aunt, uncle, cousin, second cousin, close friends. Like it was a couple of hundred people that came because they were all willing to travel to Amherst for my big day. It was a very memorable event and a big party. And I have to say that as a person who interacts, well, for most of my life, I've interacted with more secular communities and I have mostly non-religious friends. And so my own bat mitzvah was the only large religious event that I've attended aside from a few big weddings through my life. So I hold it up as one of the most spectacular and meaningful religious events that I've been to. Now, once I went to university, I abandoned a traditional religious practice and instead I joined a women's Wiccan circle. Now, this was a collective of peace workers and environmentalists who practiced earth-based teachings because our goal was to become better warriors and we wanted to save Mother Earth from the ravages of humanity. Where I went to school was near Rocky Flats, which is where they made the triggers for nuclear warheads during the Cold War. And because of the enriched plutonium that was required, there's a region in Colorado that's permanently polluted with radiation. And so we were rallying around cleaning up Rocky Flats, and we formed a Wiccan circle to bring that earth energy to heal the planet. So once again, it was the community and belonging that I really cherished from that circle. And we also all commonly held this belief that we were working for the common good of the planet. Now, I did go to my parents' house for Passover, and I celebrated Hanukkah and a handful of Shabbat Fridays, but I didn't really have a concentrated or focused practice on Judaism or Jewish values. So my time in earth-centered spirituality continued when I went to graduate school in Oregon. I had a circle there as well that was a mixed gender, so it wasn't all female. It was another interesting, informative time in my life, learning how to work with others with the intention of healing the earth. But then my spiritual practices faded out during my postdoctoral and early professor years, and I didn't really have any religious or spiritual practice. Now, when I came to Edmonton, my children were quite young, 3 and 5 years old, and my then husband and I discussed joining a Jewish congregation. But with our 2 young children and moving across borders and starting the new academic positions, the idea of including a religious practice was it was too much for us at the time. So after a few years in Edmonton and a divorce when my kids were 7 and 9 years old, I was introduced to Westwood by a man that I was dating, as many of you already know. And I had never heard of Unitarian Universalism. It was new to me. But when I entered the sanctuary, what impressed me the most was the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism that were posted around the walls. And these principles resonate with the values I learned from Jewish teachings. And those shared principles are inherent worth and dignity of all people, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, a responsible search for meaning, although in Judaism that search is strictly within the one God, the goal of world community with peace, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Now that last one is the 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web. And this 7th principle is the one that touches me the most deeply, probably because it ties in with both of my other religious traditions, both Judaism and earth-centered spirituality. So all 3 have that 7th principle very much in mind in daily practice and worship. So this principle teaches us that we are all interconnected, not just the people, but also the plants, the animals, the soil, the sky, all existence of which we are an integral part. So in my view, and the way that I interpret this, the Jewish laws of kosher represent a specific example of the 7th principle in practice. The kosher laws outline a strict set of rules regarding the preparation and consumption of food. And one of these rules is that meat and dairy are not to be consumed together. So there is a line that's repeated 3 times in the Torah that states, "You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk." Kid, of course, meaning a goat. The reason for this statement is manifold, but the one that I resonate with the most is that it's a cruel act to boil a baby goat in the source of its sustenance. Now, to draw a parallel in today's world in facing climate change, we, which means all of humanity, are boiling ourselves and all other life forms by raising the temperature of the planet that sustains us. So we're purposely ignoring the interconnected web because our systems of economy and lifestyle are not integrated with natural planetary forces. So in effect, our lives, all of our lives, are now threatened by the very source of our sustenance. And to continue our relentless release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere is, in my opinion, a cruel act. So to bring us back to the 7 and now possibly 8 Unitarian Universalist principles, those principles were made to guide us to make choices that equalize and elevate the lived experience for all humans and all other beings. Westwood and Unitarian Universalism asks us to directly interface with the systems and choices that sustain and can potentially elevate our life experience. Now, a couple of years ago, Trudy Grenauer and Ilara and I attended a Friday service at Temple Beth Ora, which is in downtown Edmonton, for International Women's Day. And I hadn't attended a Jewish Shabbat service for many, many years. So I was excited to see what Temple Beth Ora was all about. Now, stepping into the sanctuary, I immediately felt the old world in my blood and a belonging to my people. And it was a beautiful experience. Now, Temple Beth Ora, guided by Rabbi Gila Kane, is a Reformed synagogue that shares similar values to Westwood. On their website, they have a statement that Temple Beth Ora is an open, inclusive, and affirming community where anyone can come to find refreshment of soul. So that's similar to the Westwood mission statement. They also say we celebrate our unity by engaging our members through program planning, educational programs, life cycle events, social action, and worship. We nurture our diversity by providing support to interfaith couples, LGBTIQQA2 members, and new congregants. So again, it's a parallel there, and both communities have that welcoming, purposeful space where we are sharing our search for meaning in life. So Temple Beth Ora and Rabbi Gila Kane are committed to an earth-centric focus as well. And many of the Jewish holidays are celebrated there from a perspective of a connection to the earth as an expression of worship to God. And I find that really special about Temple Beth Ora. It's not something that you find in all Jewish congregations, but it's certainly in this one. And it's important to remember that Temple Beth Ora is an authentic Jewish congregation where prayer and worship focus on the one God, the Torah, and the commandments. But the parallels between Westwood and Temple Beth Ora are striking because they intersect at the points that I most value, which is openness, welcoming to all people, and respect for the interconnected web. Now, over the last few months, Ilara invited me to join a discussion group online because of COVID, which has been great because it's easy to attend, as we all know. So I'm attending a discussion group at Temple Beth Ora on what's called the Shemitah year, which is the last in a 7-year agricultural cycle. The Shemitah year is the land's Shabbat, in which all agricultural activity ceases, and the only food that grows without extensive human intervention is available to eat. However, for this to work well, all of the people must work together communally to ensure that there is plenty for all and no one goes hungry. Also for the Shemitah year, all debts of the people in the community are forgiven, which I think is another beautiful expression of recognizing the interconnected web and what can limit people and their ability to survive in a year where we're not allowed to intervene with the planet in creating our food. The Shemitah year is religiously sanctioned respect for the interconnected web, and that respect is not just between the people and the land, but also between the people themselves. So for the year, everyone has to work together so all are sustained. At Temple Beth Ora, what we're doing through these conversations is working as a group to figure out in a real world sense how we as Edmontonians can support the upcoming Shemitah year as a community. So this is a fun challenge. I'm excited and a little afraid of it, I have to admit, but it's a way to purposefully practice both Jewish and Unitarian values to do a real world experience of how do we consume food for a year that's independent of extensive agricultural practice. So that's what the group is about. Now, to conclude this story of mine, I'll go back to the title of my topic today, which is integrating paths. So in this country, we're so fortunate because we have the freedom to pursue a responsible search for meaning. And that's also stated as a Unitarian Universalist principle, and it's also a Jewish value. The UUs value the sources, and the sources include texts from other religions and also religious scholars, like those that practice Judaism and Jewish people themselves, and also from earth-centered practices. So for me, I combine all of the sources to speak in a unified voice to my soul, to the necessity of community and cooperation in the face of climate change, and also to the serious social justice issues that are keeping us from living equally in a full, safe, and sustainable way on our planet Earth. So for me, I'm grateful to have found an integrated path. I'm also grateful for the continued growth and freedom that I have in pursuing this path. And most of all, I'm super grateful for the relationships that I found along the way at Westwood, at Temple Beth Ora, in the Earth-centered group, and in all of the ways that my community has helped me grow. So thank you all for listening to my story, and blessed be.
Tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one to seek the sea
These are anxious, uncertain times. Even so, there are things we do know for certain. We know that our blue boat home continues to rotate on its axis, continues its familiar sojourn around the sun. The sun sets and rises, and if we remember to pause, we may lose ourselves but for a moment in the glorious play of light and color on the horizon. We know that beneath the crust of cold earth, the crocuses and the daffodils are stirring in their winter hibernation. The energy of life and living is pulsing in them and in the latent blades of grass and the unseen poplar buds. And it's pulsing in us too. The pulse of life calls us to nourish our bodies with good food and movement, nourish our spirits with art and song, friendship and tenderness and quiet. When we heed the pulse of life, we know what we need to do. To rise in the morning and rest into darkness. To put our hands, hearts, and minds to work. To meet those in our midst with compassion. To join with the vulnerable and speak truth to power. To play with our youngest and hear the wisdom of our elders. To heal the sick and wounded. To grieve the dying and remember the dead. To be of use and sometimes to be still. The pulse of life is beating in each and every one of us. Amidst the clamor of these times, let us heed its sure and steady rhythm. Although we extinguish our shared flames, we carry them with us until we meet again. Thank you for joining us this morning. Our community is enriched by your presence.